Mark Rogers, TV Talk and USC Football. We bring in Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles, and you can also join him on his new platform, Saturdays with Nick. Follow him on Facebook there and also on Twitter. And Nick, how you doing on this fine Friday night?
Great. We're getting closer to football season. It's exciting, but man, August is just, I think, the longest month ever. I'll tell you.
It's long and it's hot.
Yeah.
But living in the Northeast, I also know what the winters are like. So I will take long and hot over long and cold.
That's fair. I'll accept
each and every time for me, at least. So USC is hoping to get in a scrimmage in not a long format, but a short format on Saturday with the Rams playing just across the street later in the day. So going into this first Saturday scrimmage, your thoughts about what you've seen and heard at camp and what's notable at this point?
Yeah, so a lot of the question marks USC has coming into the season seem to kind of be really the answers to those seem to be taking shape pretty well. The offensive line, I think, is a huge concern everyone has. They got to replace 3 starters, and everybody's wondering, how if that unit's going to regress, and if so, how bad is it? But they have the talent there, and so everyone was just worried, will they find the right combination of guys that works best and, does what they need to do, keeping Darnold upright and getting Rojo a crease to run in. But it sounds like Clay Helton and the staff thinks they're going to have a working lineup within the next week or two. He seems like he's got it pretty close. He's going to give some other guys a few more opportunities to really crack into the ones. But I think he's really got his eye on a particular starting 5. He might make some tweaks here or there, but that unit could come that question could be solved actually pretty quickly, and then they can spend the rest of camp with their starting 5 set, just working on improving and working as a unit and getting together. So that should be very good. That was one of my biggest worries was not that they didn't have the talent on the line, is just finding the right combination that works and gets the job done, because your line is only good as your weakest player. And, they get Stanford week 2. And so that was a concern. They didn't have a lot of time to get it together on the O-line before it was tested. So that's I think pretty huge. Turns out winning the line of scrimmage is important. The other big question mark on the offense was the new receivers. They lost their top 2 pass catchers. Juju Smith-Schuster was amazing, and he was made a ton of production. But the concern was, who steps up, who's the new guy, and will all of the new talented faces kind of get together and in sync? And there's plenty of talent there. I don't think they're worried about not having targets for Darnold to throw to. They've got a ton of elite wide receivers, both old and new. They have several really good tight ends now, which is weird considering just a couple of years ago they had, I think, 1, maybe 0 tight ends on the roster. And they're working the running backs in the passing game too. So this actually could be, there won't be necessarily a dominant stud wide receiver like Juju Smith-Schuster, but they might be able to spread the ball out very well. And in particular, redshirt freshman Tyler Vaughns is really coming on strong at the wide receiver unit. And of all the new faces at wide receiver, he seems to be making the strongest case for breaking into the starting lineup, because, they know Deontay Burnett's going to be good. They got Jalen Green, a couple other guys coming in, but these new faces that are elite. Tyler Vaughns is really coming on strong. Michael Pittman is also there. Pittman showed some flashes last year, but Vaughns is really, really making a case. And so he could have a breakout year, particularly if everybody focuses in on Deontay Burnett and his 3 touchdown performance in the Rose Bowl and his ability to catch passes in triple coverage that doesn't seem possible. So Vaughn's could come out and really be a big piece to this wide receivers unit. And then the rest of the concern is just, you got a lot of new faces, got to get everybody in sync, and then Darnold's just got to get comfortable with, where their tendencies, where do they prefer the ball, how do they prefer, do they want it hard in their hands, do they want it kind of lobbed up top, and what their catch radius is. Like, you want to match up the throwing lane you have versus whether or not the receiver can actually get to it. And so it's really like, again, we know Deontay Burnett is going to be great, but all these other guys, what's their catch radius? What are their preferences and tendencies? And so all of that's mostly just reps. And, as they do more reps and that goes along, I think that'll be fine. So things are looking good on the offense. Curiously on defense, I think they're trying to replace Stevie T at nose tackle. The guy in him leaving for the NFL was a huge loss, both literally and figuratively. But they actually have 4 really talented options now to play on that interior D-line. And as great as Stevie T was, they could have a really solid rotation of just guys that can all play at an elite level at the position. The defensive line coach has said right now, everybody's really good at that spot, but it's going to be about who sort of has a mastery of the system and his job and how it fits into the role, because the physical tools are all there. And in a lot of ways, sometimes their job is just take up space. But the defensive line coach is really excited about the 4 guys on that rotation. And then I think the coolest, interesting thing is running back Dominic Davis, has flipped to defensive back, which is not normally a position change we see. I think you normally see like DB to wide receiver, quarterback to wide receiver, maybe running back to linebacker or vice versa. But Dominic Davis, he played DB in high school. But I think it's just a matter of getting him on the field and utilizing his skills, because the depth chart at running back is insanely loaded. And it's getting even better. There's even more talented young guys coming in behind him. He's got Rojo in front of him. And so he's probably not going to get a lot of touches at running back, but at defensive back, they're going to have to spend a lot of time in nickel. They're going to have a solid 2 deep on that nickel. And so he could come in and really have an opportunity to play a lot of time and probably play pretty decently at defensive back. They've only done it for a day or two, and he's held his own, and, doing well in practice for a day or two is not necessarily predictive of anything, but it could be interesting, and he doesn't seem lost out there or in over his head. He's doing pretty well. And so it's going to be weird to see if he actually makes it into a game playing defensive back, even though he was a running back like literally a day and a half ago. So there's a lot of interesting things coming out of camp. I think at this point, the last sort of major concern that hasn't been addressed or isn't in the process of being addressed is field goal kicking. Matt Boermeister, who hit the game winner in the Rose Bowl, he is no longer with the team. And the new guys coming in have not really shown sort of any consistency in hitting kicks in practice, which is a concern, because if you can't hit them consistently in the controlled environment of practice, what do you think their odds are of doing it in front of 80,000 people on national television? So they're going to have to figure something out. I don't think it's panic time. I think even though there's a lot of USC media folks and pundits and analysts who are already talking about if they should just automatically be in 4-down territory as soon as they cross the 40. I don't think we're there yet, but you do have to be concerned if you can't hit field goals. You do, have to account for it and plan for it and hope for the best. But it could be an issue. It certainly would have been an issue in the Rose Bowl and a couple other tight games. But they've got a huge question mark at field goal kicker right now. And right now, I don't know how bad it is or how much it changes things, but it's going to be an issue if in your back pocket you don't have a guaranteed 3. Even more concerning is not just that the field goal kicker isn't good, it's that last year in the red zone, if you can believe it, USC's offense was not good. They were kind of, I believe, in the bottom half in red zone and putting the ball in the end zone from the red zone. So if you have to keep settling for 3s because you can't get the job done, if they don't improve in the red zone and you have to keep settling for 3s, but all of a sudden you don't have a guy who can hit the 3s, that's where it becomes a concern. And so that sort of problem, those things could compound and really cause some issues. But again, it's, that's where we 10, 11 days into August. There's a lot that's going to happen between now and September 2nd. But if the season were to start tomorrow, this is what we'd be dealing with. But I think they're heading in the right direction, but field goal could be an issue.
That final kick for Bormeister that you mentioned in the Rose Bowl was from 46 yards away. And the reason I mention the yardage is that according to the LA Times article I'm looking at about the place kicking woes for USC, is that between Michael Brown, a redshirt freshman who's trying to steal the job, and Chase McGrath, who's a preferred walk-on, neither one of them has been able to make a kick from 45 yards out through the first few weeks of practice, and it's causing Clay Helton to exclaim things like, to quote him, "Thank God, 3 weeks until the opener to try to figure this out and get somebody who can kick it through the uprights and kick with some distance."
Mm-hmm. I will say this, though, yes, that sounds really bad, and it could be very bad, but USC has possibly one of the best special teams coaches in the nation, possibly the best. So, if you have to bet on a coach, on any coach getting it turned around, it would be their special teams coach. Although I think right now he's also very much concerned about how to replace Adoree Jackson in returns. Not that you really can, but if there is a coaching staff out there that get it turned around, it's the special teams coach. So it could be really bad, or it could be just, we still got 2.5, 3 weeks. Let's all just take a deep breath and not live or die with every field goal attempt in practice. But if their first game was tomorrow, yes, they should absolutely account for not being able to hit field goals, and yes, they should absolutely be in 4-down territory as soon as they cross the other team's 40, basically. But their first game is not tomorrow, and as Clay Helton said, thank God for that. But they've got plenty of time. They'll get it. Most of this stuff will get sorted out. I think they'll be fine. But if they continue to struggle in the red zone and they can't hit 3s, they can't get 3s when they're there, that's where you could really see a problem, because then we're going to get into a situation where USC can only score points from like the 40-yard line, which if there's a guy that could do it, it's probably Darnold or Trace McSorley out of Penn State. But man, that does not sound like a reliable path to the Pac-12 championship.
Yeah, so for USC fans, they want to see a field goal kicker on the field frequently, but that after scoring touchdowns for the extra points from kicking from the 3-yard line. Dominic Davis, as you mentioned, making the switch to defensive back. It'll be interesting to see how he develops. But if he's holding his ground, as you mentioned, Nick, that speaks volumes against that wide receiver core. Did have 27 touches last year. That's 23 rushes and 4 receptions. But now he's a DB there at USC. All right, Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles. Also join him on Facebook and Twitter at Saturdays with Nick. Nick with a number of exciting outlets that have just been launched, and some material headed our way that we'll talk about in future weeks. All right, Nick, we appreciate the time.
Of course, Mark, anytime.